All right, why this year's team is the most talented South Carolina football team we've seen in a decade. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. It is great, as always, to have you along. Thank you for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Listen, today's show is brought to you by our friends at the Ultimate College Football HC. That is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Sounds awesome. Use the promo code LockedOnCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. A lot of fun. We have a lot of fun on the show today. I'm very excited about it. We have a really good topic to kick off the show about I teased it in the opener, whether or not this is the most talented South Carolina football team we've had in a decade. And spoiler alert, guys, it's factually true. And I'll explain to you why. Then in the second part of the show, we're going to bring in our good buddy, Chris Gordy. He was with us on the very first show I did hosting here. Great dude, does Locked On SEC for us. Also is on radio out in Houston, covers the entire conference and a lot of college football as well. And get into some discussions with him. And then we're going to close the show with a question and answer segment from the audience. Some questions you guys threw out on Twitter as well. But I want to get into the first topic of the day because it's a good one. And this is one of my favorite metrics and stats and annual insights that comes out every single year. And like I check for this thing like I used to check for like the Sears catalog when I was a kid. A lot of you are probably too young for that. I'm not sure if that was the best reference I could have used. Very, very much dating myself. But my whole point is it's one of my favorite metrics looking at the upcoming season because it gives you a really, really good insight into the overall talent at each school from not just in the SEC, but around the country. We're going to focus on what it means to South Carolina and also look at around the SEC as well. What I'm talking about is the Team Talent Composite Rankings from 247 Sports. You guys hear me talk about 247 Sports all the time. They do a tremendous job. And as we're counting down the days to kickoff, I feel like they have just killed it in terms of putting out more and more stuff that is not even like hot take season type stuff. A lot of like very, very helpful metrics and things to help you not be a casual fan, like my buddy Pate always says, and actually know the ins and outs of what we're going to see from around the country going into college football season. The Team Talent Composite Ranking, right? What it is, and I'll give you the direct quote, what it is here from 247 Sports. But 247 Sports does this every single year. They've been doing it every year since 2015. And what it does, it's a metric that helps you see the overall talent on a roster, right? And this is how they self-describe this entire thing. It's a metric that examines and ranks every FBS team, accounting for transfers, dismissals, and other early departures based on how their players were rated in high school. So it's basically telling you what the star rating was out of high school for every single player on your roster, and then putting that up against every other team in the country to see where you land. Is it completely scientific? No, sure, it's not. It is. There are some flaws to it, especially in the transfer portal era, because we see kids that either develop or don't develop, or play or don't play, despite their star rating, whether it's 3 stars or 5 stars or anything in between. We see that happen all the time. But here's the thing about this metric. There has not been a single team besides Michigan. Michigan was the first one last year that has been outside of the top 10 that has played for and or won a national title since they've begun doing the metric in 2015. Now, let's get into how this looks for South Carolina, because I was blown away and then kind of dialed it back a little bit in what the data shows, because they came out with the top 20 rankings in a graphic they posted online. South Carolina's 21st. Okay. Now, to me, when I saw that, I was like, that's great. You're 21st. That's right on the outside, right? Right on the outside. You have the 21st most talented roster based on high school stars and all that kind of stuff. Now, I said this in the start. Is this the most talented roster? Mathematically, it is. This is the highest rating you have had on your roster as a whole at South Carolina since 2015, since they started doing the metric, not just since Beamer's been there, since they started doing the actual metric. And guys, it's not particularly close. Like it is, they have a point system, and I don't really know how to explain the point system, how it's going to make any sense. But the points they had were 798. Okay, just have that in mind. South Carolina hasn't come within 35 points of that any other time since they've been doing this metric for the last decade. That's a big deal. That's a big deal because the drop-off behind that means you're talking about teams that are ranked like 25th and out, 30 and out, and it's teams that are not as good as South Carolina. It's definitely teams that have not competed at a very high level like South Carolina has tended or has been able to do at times over the last decade. Having this roster in place, just by the numbers, like I said, 798 points, to put that in perspective, that is 30 total players that are a 5-star or a 4-star coming out of high school. 30 total. That's the most you've had. That's really big, guys. And then you start looking at what the other numbers were. This is when I kind of dialed it back because I was like, okay, 21st. I wonder where it compares in the other years. I'm just going to go down the list. 2023, you were 22nd, so you moved up a year. 2022, you were 21st. 2021, you were 22nd. 2020, you were 21st. 2019, 21st. 2018, 21st. 2017, you were 27th. 2016, you were 23rd. And in 2015, you were 22nd. South Carolina has been 22nd or 21st in the country in this specific metric in 7 of those 9 years. So part of me like looks at that and thinks, well, maybe they don't need to get that. We don't need to get that excited about it because, you know, if you've been here the whole time and you've seen, listen, like 2020, you were ranked 21st and you went 2-8, right? Like we've seen years where they've underwhelmed at times. But here's the thing. When you look at the roster as a whole, in comparison to where everywhere else is in the SEC, that's where I get really excited because it shows two things. It shows that Beamer has built a sustainable number because even back in like the other years when you're talking about like 2019, you only got 1 5-star and you got 23 4-stars. You have multiple 5-stars every single year that he's been there. You've had 3 in 2 of those years, and you've had right on average of 24 total 4-stars. Keep in mind that like this currently ranks 21st and it's 12th in the SEC, but that's with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas. So when I look at that and I'm like, all right, well, then remove the other 11 teams. Then the way you look at this is, sure, South Carolina's got a battle within the SEC, right? But big picture-wise, guys, this is the most talented roster you have had since they started keeping the metric. And I've already told you the teams that are ranked inside the top 10 and all that kind of stuff, like Bama and Georgia and Ohio State and all those, like there has only been one team that has competed and played for one national championship that's outside of this top 10. And that's not necessarily where South Carolina might be this year. However, it's where you want to go and you want to start getting into the actual playoff itself. But going back to what I said, like in comparison to this, like where you are in the SEC, remove yourself from that for a second, right? Because once you start looking at that, like you're 12th in your conference, but you're 21st overall. In comparison to the rest of the country, you have one of the 10 best rosters in the entire country. It shows you, one, how difficult it is in the SEC, how competitive it is in the SEC. And I say this all the time, too. It's not even just like the record and the standings you see in conference, especially at the end of the year. It's the recruiting in the SEC is crazy. It's almost the best example is like SEC baseball. Like you could be 20th and you are 12th. Like it's a very good example here. You could be 20th nationally and you're like 12th in the conference. It's a good example here. But my point here, my main takeaway from this is this. Going into the season, you've had all this outside speculation. Matt Moscona, my other boss, brought this up the other day. And when he said it, not a lot of you were watching this episode, and I'm glad you didn't, to be honest. It had one of the worst ratings we've done for any show, and that's whatever. But I'm almost glad you didn't see it because he said this during the show. He's an LSU guy. He covers LSU better than anybody else in the country, really. And he said, South Carolina doesn't have anybody. They don't have a good roster. And as soon as he said it, I was like, I love Matt to death. I'm very grateful for the job and career he's given me outside of this. It felt like he was saying that from a place of, and this word has negative connotation, so I don't want it to come off in a bad way. I don't think he had done his research before he said that. And that's all I'll say. It is the most talented roster you've had in since they started keeping this metric. And maybe against, it doesn't really compare as much to Texas or Bama or Ohio State or whatever. And I know where it falls in the conference, but you've seen what you've done with less. And now you have 30 of 85 scholarships, guys. What's the math on that? 3 out of 8 is 37.5. So whatever 30 by, I can just do it on my phone instead of trying to do mental math. 30 divided by 85. You're talking about your overall roster. Your overall roster, you've got 35.3% of your roster are blue chip recruits, defined as by a 4 or 5 star. That's huge. We talk all the time about those 2011 through 2013 seasons, and I don't know what the total numbers were on that because they weren't keeping up with this metric. I doubt that the roster was as loaded now as it was in those 3 years. But it's the most loaded roster you've had. And here's the scary thing, guys. Here's the scary thing. Like I've said before, you already know that someone's going to step up at receiver, probably multiple guys at receiver that you've gotten from the transfer portal. Or maybe it is a guy like Nick Harbor, right? But the guys that are projected to start there weren't all 4-star recruits. You had a, like kid from you have Gage or whatever that is coming in. Excuse me. Gage that came in, Larvadane. I don't know why I put the R in the wrong part every single time. I swear I'm going to get it at some point. My point is he came from a MAC school. You know damn well that he wasn't like a 4 or 5-star recruit, but he's going to put up numbers in this offense. We see it every time with South Carolina and their receivers. Every single time. Like, there wasn't a ton of production this first year, and now look what Josh Vann, Deebo Samuel, Xavier Legette, Juice Wells, like look at what they did from 1 year to year 2. It is our guest is texting me. Hold on. But what I'm saying is like the scary part of this is you have those 30 players, 35% of your roster, the most you've had in a decade that are blue chip recruits, 35%. Then you have those other guys, the guys that you fill out in the offensive line, some of the transfer guys you got from that are going to fill out in your edge position or edge rush positions and things like that. I already mentioned the receiver, the depth you have at running back. Those are not 4 and 5-star recruits coming out of high school. But they're going to produce because they already have at the collegiate level, whether it be in a Maction school, a G5 school, a HBCU, any of that. You have proof that they can produce at the college level, and they're not even included in this. That's a scary thing to think about. Like what the outside perception of this team is, there's no talent on it. It's the most talent they've had in the last decade. And you start comparing it with some of these other schools that are on this year's schedule, it's better than Kentucky, right? Like obviously it's better than Vandy. You're right behind 17 through 21 are all SEC teams. Tennessee, Auburn, Mizzou, Ole Miss. You are right behind Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is talked about like they're going to be world beaters. This is the most talented team you've had since not only Shane Beamer, but in the last decade, like I've said already 1,000 times during this episode. That is a really big deal. And I continue to say they are going to shock someone. And it might be multiple people because this roster is much, much deeper than people are giving it credit for right now. All right, let's get into our next segment because if we don't, our guest is going to lose his mind because he won't stop texting me about it. But before we do, I want to give a quick shout out to our good friends at Ibotta. I've told you guys about this before. If you guys have been saving up for anything, whether it be a trip, whether it be a dinner or a flight or whatever, I'm telling you right now, you've got to go use our friends at Ibotta. They do an incredible job. It's a free app you can earn cash back to right off the bat. And I'm not talking about cash back where you go, we have points or we have whatever. It is cash back that you can take directly out of the Ibotta account and turn it into money in your actual bank account. or your PayPal or a gift card, whatever you want. The average Ibotta user earns $256 a year. Like I said, guys, that can cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, a flight you've been eyeing, or a fancy dinner you've been craving. You can use and save Ibotta on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, all those things. Make sure you join the 50 million users of Ibotta today and earn cash back every single time that you use the app. All you have to do is go to the Google Play Store or the App Store, download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, all one word, LockedOnCollege at Ibotta. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store. And right now, guys, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for using the code, registering, and trying the app. That's all you got to do. Sign up today. You will not regret it, I promise. So there you go. All right, make sure you stick around for the next part of our show. I'm going to stop talking about rankings, and we're going to bring in our good buddy Chris Gordy, and we're going to talk about the upcoming season, including my question to him, which is, where are the Gamecocks going to pull an upset? Because we know it's happening at some point. Make sure you're sticking around for the next part of the show here on Locked On Gamecocks. All right, guys, welcome back in. Not my best transition there. I'll say it. The cadence was not great, but we're learning, whatever. Before we get into our next part of the show and bring in our good friend Chris Gordy, I want to remind you, I appreciate you guys so much making your first listen Locked On Gamecocks, but make sure for your second listen, you're listening to Locked On College Football. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, you can get all of that in Locked On's stable of college experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their own conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we are now going to be joined by our good buddy, Chris Gordy. What a great transition. For the first time ever we've done this, it feels like my camera is better than yours. I don't know what's going on here. How are you doing, though?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Welcome in. It's week 0. We are closing in on week 1, and we're so close. What's going on, man?
Not much, man. I'm real excited about it. We've got man, like I did my first deep dive. We're gonna get in probably get into it on tomorrow's episode about my best bets for the weekend. And casually throw out a shout out to our friends at FanDuel or something like that. But I did my first deep dive for betting on games in the season. I don't want to get into that today. I do want to get into some other questions I have for you, and I'm kind of going to pigeonhole you into forcing you into believing this narrative that I think that I don't even feel like it's far-fetched, and it's something that I've said it enough times at this point where I believe it based off that, and I also believe it based off the numbers. But I give you 4 games and that are on South Carolina's schedule this year. I'm talking about A&M, Mizzou, LSU, and Ole Miss. Very tough 4 games. And South Carolina does not have a great record against. They've lost 5 straight to Mizzou. They're 1-9 the last 10 years against A&M. But all 4 of those teams come to Williams-Brice Stadium. If you had to rank those teams in order of most likely for South Carolina to upset to least likely, what would it be in?
Oh man. So it's give me again, it's LSU, it's Missouri,
A&M,
and
Ole Miss. And listen, I'll give you a second to think about it because I know I've caught you off guard. Now, a real professional like you would have sent you the topics we were going to discuss beforehand, but I didn't do that.
You barely send the link to get into that.
I was driving a point home, and I was like, hold on, Gordy's texting me right now, just on air. I will give you these stats that I brought up with this, okay? Keep in mind that A&M is 2-9 over the last 2 years in road games. Mizzou had a 2-13 record, I believe, 2-13 in the first 3 seasons on the road under Drinkwitz. They went 5-1 in road or neutral games last year, but that's what their record was in the first 3 years for a bigger sample size. Ole Miss is 11-8 over the last 3 years on the road. but only one time have they beaten a team in a true road game that finished with a winning record, and that was Tulane. And last but not least, your alma mater, LSU. LSU is 8-11 in the last 3 years in road games. So I feel like I said it like on our show that we did the preview show for SEC. They're going to jump up and get somebody. Who do you think that is? Or give me 1 through 4, the most to least likely.
Well, and by the way, I really like the 24/7 Sports put out, their quarterback rankings for the entire Power 4 this week. And, they had LaNorris Sellers a little higher than I thought, people would have had him. In fact, he was ahead of Peyton Thorne at Auburn, which I found very interesting because Peyton Thorne's got several seasons of playing experience, a full season at Auburn.
And a better supporting cast receiver-wise.
Yeah, I mean, he started in some big games at Michigan State, yet 24/7 still thought, best, that LaNorris Sellers is ahead of him. And so, I'm going to be curious to see what he can do. They had him 47th, by the way, of 68. So, he's ahead of guys. I know people are really high on DeQuinn Finn at Baylor, Hudson Card at Purdue. They had Cade Klubnik at Clemson.
That was my favorite part. Klubnik at 51.
So I wonder, and I got excited for LaNorris Sellers back in spring when Shane Beamer comes out and goes, he's our, QB1 heading into the summer. And then I saw people like Brad Crawford and some people who've been to practice and stuff, and they started saying, well, wait a minute, Robbie Ashford, was starting to look pretty decent. And wait, what I thought this was all LaNorris Sellers. And I was like, well, maybe they're just trying to pressure him to make him earn that QB1 spot. But I say all that to say, like, I think it's Sellers, time to shine now. And I think people are if you're not paying attention to him yet, you will get to know him. And I think last time I was on with you, I said, what if it's the other extreme? What if he has a Johnny Manziel type season? It could certainly turn the tide in South Carolina, and we could be looking back going, man, we didn't see that coming. But,
right.
Shane Beamer's recruited well. They got some good pieces. So, if any of those teams, and all 4 teams you mentioned are preseason top 20, but if there's one that's a big FRAUD in my mind, it's potentially A&M. Like, how did we go from, man, Jimbo really ran this thing into the ground. He bought a recruiting class and everybody left and all this to, hey, we're going to get the Kentucky coach who's won more games than Bear Bryant at Kentucky, to suddenly, no, we want the Duke coach, the guy who just won at Duke. And we're like, wait, what? And now all of a sudden we go from A&M, watch out for them, man. They might be a dark horse. Like, I know everybody thinks they're going to go 5-6 wins, but they might win 7 games if you're not careful. To suddenly, dude, I think 8 or 9 wins for A&M.
Yeah.
Like, where did all this come from? Like, they have not played it's almost like a 4-star recruit in December, and then in April he's a 5-star, and he hasn't played any games. He hasn't done anything. All we did was just hyped him up. And it's like, dude, he hasn't played a game. How do you go from a 4 to a 5-star?
Right.
That's what I feel like A&M is right now, where we're like, we've convinced ourselves they're a preseason top 20 team. Like, I think he's done a good job in the transfer portal. I love the addition of Nick Scorton from Purdue. Connor Wegman, I mean, dude, we've seen him play a handful of games, and it's been a mixed bag. There's been some good, some bad. Yet I got some draft analysts out there wanting to put him as a first-round pick next year. I'm like,
yeah, more and more.
Can I see him please win a couple of big games before we elevate Connor Wegman? So just kind of off the cuff, you throwing that question at me, A&M would seem to be the one. And you mentioned their lack of road success. Granted, it was under Jimbo Fisher, but I think even – the Kevin Sumlin era, I mean, they've not had great success as a road team. So, I think Elko, this is going to be a little bit more of a transition year than I think A&M fans, or at least, the general public and media are expecting for A&M. And I think that's one that's prime for South Carolina to win. But to your point too, Mizzou, bro, like, you were awesome last year, great year. Can you do it again?
Right.
And you got Brady Cook back, you got Luther Burden back, but God forbid Brady Cook gets hurt.
Yeah,
man, I don't think they know what they have behind him.
Yeah, I thought you were going to spell out injuries. I tried to do that on the show yesterday, and I accidentally misspelled it, which was a very, very tough scene. I left out the E, which was not my favorite moment on the show. But no, it's like I don't disagree with what you're saying. The A&M thing is weird. I talked to somebody out there about this, and I'm just hear me out, audience, and you too, Gordy, because I think it made a lot of sense to me, but it's just the name that I'm going to throw out there has such a visceral reaction to people. But just hear me out. Part of the reason I think for this A&M love I was talking to somebody close to the program at A&M, and he said it's almost like Jimbo Fisher has this like Trump effect on people where he's become so hated in College Station that even now he's gone, and like that the roster isn't like crazy. Like it's not like they have a ton of time, and like they have underperformed constantly. And we both brought up the road thing, but all of a sudden now that he's gone, it's like, oh my God. The most confusing thing about any team I listed is that A&M is a 2.5-point favorite, and that number has gone up from 1 in their first game of the season against Notre Dame. It's like Vegas is rarely wrong, it feels like, but at the same time, what am I missing here?
Yeah, and look, there's the reality that perhaps, Mike Elko might not be cut out to be an SEC coach. You did a great job at Duke where, there are no expectations there, and you found lightning in a bottle with Riley Leonard at quarterback, and the defense was decent enough, but they also lost some games pretty ugly. I mean, it's not like it was all sunshine and roses, and I get he was a former DC at A&M and, probably had one of their best defensive years in recent decades there at A&M under his watch, but again, that doesn't mean you could be a head coach. I always bring this up. I mean, there's guys who have been great head coaches at other schools. Yeah, I remember Brett Bielema thinking, man, this guy was awesome at Wisconsin. This guy's going to be a winner in the SEC, and he wasn't at Arkansas.
Yeah.
And there's been so many guys that have been chewed up and spit out by this conference because it's a big boy football, and some guys just maybe aren't cut out to be head coaches here. And so, again, I don't say I like Mike Elko. I got to talk with him a bit, on the coaches tour this offseason, and blue collar, man. I mean, I just love talking to some of the Texas high school football coaches. They said, Jimbo used to come in a big SUV with an entourage, and hey, Coach Fisher's coming, you get him a Diet Coke and this kind of stuff. Mike Elko pulls up by himself in his pickup truck, parks in a visitor parking spot, comes in, how you doing? Shakes hands with the coaches, knows them all by name.
Yeah.
It's a different night. He's an easy guy to root for.
Yeah.
But all that said, it doesn't mean he's going to be successful. It doesn't mean that he's going to win. And he might be down the road. This might be a transition year for A&M where they get their butts spanked week 1 against Notre Dame, and it's kind of a downward spiral. Even better for South Carolina. It makes that game even more doable.
So, and that's the thing I keep looking at too. It's like I love the fact that you brought up the thing with Sellers and him being like, okay, but like we talk nonstop, like it's around the country of like, yeah, they're not going to be any good. And there's not even like a what if. It's like, yeah, they'll be 4-8, they'll be 5-7, whatever. Like afterthought, dismissed, whatever. What if LaNorris Sellers, you said Johnny Manziel. Like I think that's like probably far-fetched, but what if he is a 3,400 total yards combined, like incredible athlete? Like what if he has the KJ Jefferson year? Because he's like physically he's built similarly to him. And like he has a 2021 KJ Jefferson type year where Arkansas goes off and wins 9 games. Because the other part of this is too, Gordy, is that like I understand they're an underdog in all these big games, and they're not really even considered toss-up games to anyone outside of Columbia. But dude, how rare is it that when you're looking at a schedule and you're talking about this team's going to suck, they're going to have a losing record, and then you start looking at the schedule and it's like, whoa. Sure, Clemson's going to be tough. You have a road game at Clemson. Kentucky is going to be difficult. Week 2 on the road. Bama, sure. Oklahoma, whatever. But again, those 4 core games that I just brought up, you get all of them at home. All of them. And like, I don't care how this sounds. It isn't Bama coming to Williams-Brice. It's not Oklahoma, a team that's won 10 or more wins in 19 of the last 24 seasons. Like, it's not those teams coming here. It's like, it's the ones that do have a bigger chance, I feel like, of getting got because of the history of what we've seen them do. Like, I just feel like if Sellers is, I don't know what the ceiling could be, but if the ceiling is at a 10 and he hits a 7 or an 8 out of it, I think that still translates into a lot of success. Here's the other thing I wanted to ask you before we let you go, because I know you have an interview coming up after this, but dude, this defense, I feel like it can end up being statistically one of the top 5 defenses in the conference. Obviously, Georgia's going to be great. I think Bama's got a lot of frontline talent. LSU will be really, really improved. I think they're going to be a team that's going to surprise a lot of people. But if you talk to anyone close to South Carolina, like the confidence they have coming from that side of the ball, it's almost like the most foregone conclusion of like, yeah, we got that in our back pocket. Like we're good there. And I know they've struggled over the past couple of years, but what do you think the ceiling is for this defense and what that could translate to?
Well, it feels like the secondary has always been pretty good. Like, they've put so many guys into the NFL the last 4 or 5 years from that secondary.
Yeah.
And it's guys that maybe at the start of the season we're not talking about a ton. But, I've the name that's come up a lot this offseason is, Nick Emenwari. A lot of people saying that, they think he's due for, a big year. DQ Smith has been talked about. Jalen Kilgore. I think that it starts with the secondary. Obviously, we know how good Debo Williams is at linebacker. And, I think linebacker's kind of been a mixed bag for them. It sucks to lose Stone Blanton, but I think it starts up front. And it starts up with that big D line. And, what is Gilbert Edmond now? A guy who obviously was there and spent some time at Florida State. Kyle Kennard from Georgia Tech, and then, of course, some of the other pieces they brought in through the portal. And
the freshman, Dylan Stewart.
Yeah, and then everybody's excited about to see what he can do. Tonka Hemingway's been around a while. So there's a depth there. And I thought last year, the offensive line and defensive line were just not good. I thought South Carolina lost a lot of games in the trenches when they got into, prime time against some of the big SEC opponents. So it is very interesting. I've heard a lot of people that have been there throughout fall camp and takeaway saying they've come away impressed by this defense. And to your point, can be better than a lot of people maybe give them credit for. It's just so hard to get a read on some of these transfers. And, will they hit the ground running? It's the big C word, chemistry. I always go back to 2 years ago, LSU went into the transfer portal, basically rebuilt their whole secondary through the portal, and it worked.
Yeah.
Last year they did it, and it didn't work. Auburn tried to do it with their offensive line. It took some time to get going, and that chemistry, you never really know how long it's going to take some of these transfers to adjust and settle in. But to me, the big one is on the offensive side, the wide receivers, how quickly these guys gel and come to their fruition. But again, to the LaNorris Sellers, what's his ceiling? We said the Johnny Manziel thing, and like you said, it's a little bit of an extreme because he won the Heisman as a freshman. But what were we saying about Joe Burrow after the 2018 season? He's a pretty good quarterback. Then becomes one of the greatest quarterbacks ever in 19.
16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, Baker Mayfield, when he was at Texas Tech, I mean, it was like he was a walk-on. Kyler Murray at A&M was a big, highly touted dude, 5-star, but didn't really show, it was a mixed bag.
And then
I mean, there's so many, the list is long, and obviously those are guys who played a year and then went somewhere else and became much better. But I'm just saying, sometimes there's a guy that catches lightning in a bottle. And if you want a real hot take, how about this one? Everybody talk about Nico Iamaleava and, oh man, great dual threat. He's going to take the SEC by storm at Tennessee. What if it's flipped? And what if it's LaNorris Sellers we're talking about, and Nico goes through his struggles, throws interceptions and all that? I'm just saying it's within the realm of possibility.
No, I love that. It's also a perfect segue because we are going to talk about that in our final segment. But Gordy, I appreciate you coming on, man. Really do. Listen, I'll tell you what, quick sentimental moment here. All right. Today's National Radio Day. You tweeted about. You've been in radio for 18 years. I want to say directly to you, thank you. This guy is the first person, gave my first break on radio in 2018 to come on and do interviews every Friday at 12:30 Eastern time. And you would intro me by playing Alabama Song of the South. To this day, it's my favorite thing on radio that I've done. I can't imagine the dumb crap that I said, but appreciate you. Tell everyone where they can find your stuff, and we'll have to do this again soon, man.
Yeah, and we've regretted that decision every day since. But the Locked On SEC is where we are, of course, partners with this podcast. Marler's talking all the specific things about South Carolina, but also talking some big picture SEC stuff. We're talking the whole SEC as a whole. And South Carolina, give us a reason to talk more about you this year.
Yeah,
we will do that on Locked On SEC.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, see ya.
All right, appreciate that dude, not only for coming on, but all the things he's done for me on and off air. Great friend, does a great job at everything he does. Listen, before we close out the show, want to say once again, Locked On Gamecock fans, want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you are going to love as much as I do. It's called Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach, lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of, I don't know, Furman, South Carolina, wherever, anywhere but Clemson? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, all those things. You control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Maybe, I don't know the ins and outs of it yet, but if there's a transfer portal, maybe you are the coach of Clemson because you didn't believe in that either. Will you be able to handle the pressure? Find out today. Here's what I really love about this game, though. If you are responsible for calling offensive plays during the game, your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can go play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Gamecock fans. Use the promo code LockedOnCFB, all one word, all caps. Use that inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure you take advantage of this perk, and it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC, begin your coaching legacy today. All right, guys. Long show today, but we got one more quick segment. It's a Q&A from the audience, and we will be right back with that. Stick around. Locked On Gamecocks continues next. All right, y'all. Listen, I told you guys this a couple times. This is y'all's show. I love doing it. I love being able to research it. I love the deep dives. I love all that stuff. But it's still y'all's show. So, that being said, send me questions on Twitter. That's Vern Funquist CFB. Send me questions, to Locked On SC. It's the Locked On Gamecocks Twitter handle as well. DM me. Send it on Instagram. I don't care. Just don't text me. Or you know what? Even that's fine. Don't call me and leave a voicemail because I will never listen to it. But all that being said, I told you guys, if you guys have questions or stuff you want me to talk about, send me a message and we will bring it up on the show. And we had a question today about this, and I really like this. And it's not off topic, but it's about a rival that South Carolina's had for a long time. They do not play this year, but it's a perfect transition as to what Gordy was talking about, considering or talking about Nico and the first year quarterback at Tennessee, because there was a question asked. Why can I not find this? This is unbelievable. I said, what is it with all of the preseason hype surrounding Tennessee? Can someone please explain this to me? As a Gamecocks fan, I have an unhealthy hatred. This is from Jess Sharp, by the way. As a Gamecock fan, I have an unhealthy hatred towards Tennessee. My bias aside, can you explain to me the love of the Vols are getting this year? They have a freshman quarterback, same as USC, which is true, yet they are being talked about as if they could make the playoffs. This is from Jess Sharp at Jess without the E. If that is a reference to Taking Back Sunday, cute without the E, fantastic reference. 2 points for you. All right, so let me answer this, because I am one of the people that's high on Tennessee this year, as much as I don't want to admit it, because, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this as an unbiased member of the media, but that second sentence, I have an unhealthy hatred towards Tennessee. There you go. Heard that. So here's the thing I think about this Tennessee team. They're really good in a lot of places that you need to be good at to compete at the highest level. What do I mean by that? I think they're going to be really good at quarterback. I really do with Nico. And just hear me out on explaining why. They also have James Pierce Jr., who is in some places considered to be a potential number one overall pick coming off the edge. We see this constantly. The most important positions in all of football: quarterback, left tackle, edge rush. It's the reason why they get paid the most. One of the other ones that you're starting to see catch up to that is the receiver room and wide receivers. Here's why I'm so high on Tennessee this year, and why I feel like they are a dark horse for me to make the playoff. Because one, you get Bama at home. I think they lose to Georgia, of course. There's no team that's dominated them more in whether it's Josh Heupel or before Josh Heupel or any of the other million coaches they've had the last 15 years. But specifically Josh Heupel, who's a really good offensive mind. And he does stuff that puts different D coordinators and defenses in very awkward situations. Like, one of the reasons why is not the splits on the offensive line, but the separation and just the way he puts his wideouts so close to the boundary. He makes your defense be so spread out. So it's listen, if you're on the outside part of the numbers, right? If you have a receiver lighting up, not on the hash, but like on the outside part of the numbers close to the sideline, that means you have to account for him. You have to go run a cornerback down there or somebody, or as Alabama did a couple years ago, a safety for some unknown reason. Come bring him down, either put him on the slot, have somebody on the boundary, and then you have you have numbers where you can run the football. And let's be clear, Josh Heupel is a run-first offensive coach. But you can run between the tackles, you can run outside, you can run zone read, all that kind of stuff. Or you can have mismatches, again, like you saw in that Bama game where you had Jalen Hyatt, a 4-3 straight line dude that is going to take off in a go route, and they have a safety on him, and he gets 5 touchdowns. He's a really good offensive mind. Schematically, he's very difficult to game plan for. Kirby Smart has dominated him on that. So all that to be said, they get Bama at home. I think they beat Bama. I think there's too many question marks, and I think specifically in that secondary that for them to lose that game. You got to go to Oklahoma. I mean, there's some other games they have on that schedule that are going to be difficult. But I think if you get to 10 wins in this conference, you're going to be able to do that. And here's the thing that's scary for me about Tennessee is they should be better up front. They are recruiting at a crazy level. It's not that I don't like Tennessee. It's that I don't like their fan base. Because their fan base makes a collective effort for whatever reason just to be awful online. I don't know why. They wear it like a badge of honor. We all want Tennessee to not succeed, if we're being honest, because it's going to be a nightmare for everyone to deal with them on social media. But that being said, I think in the NIL era and this where this is going, they're one of the blue blood teams that I think about that I don't think was ever going to go away again, right? Like teams like Texas, when NIL started, teams like Texas, teams like Tennessee, Miami, Southern Cal, those are teams that the first 4 that popped up to me that I was like, those teams are going to be back and probably be back for a long time because they have a lot of money to put in that program and they're hungry and kind of starved for winning. Not necessarily USC in that part, but Miami, Tennessee, and Texas. You've already seen it pay off in Texas. You've seen Tennessee turn the corner a little bit. Miami not yet, but they have put so much money into their classes as well. Tennessee is going to they've if you're old like me, you remember they've always had a national footprint. All those Clausens came from California. They recruited the hell out of Hawaii. Like they have been able to recruit at a national level for a long time, and they're going to put a lot of resources into the program. The other part of it is I think this receiving group they have is probably the deepest they've had since like the late 90s. When you had like Joey Kent and Nash and all those guys like Peerless Price, like it's very, very deep. They did a good job in the portal. They got younger guys, Squirrel White's back again. They got a kid from my old high school, Mike Matthews, is a 5-star receiver. Like they've got dudes in that receiver room. And I say all of this so reluctantly because it's like, this sucks. I don't want them to be great. But that is why I think that they are going to be a dark horse for the Heisman, or not Heisman, sorry, but dark horse for the college football playoff this year. Because again, like you're going to have a bottleneck there at 10 wins. Like think about this. If Mizzou gets 10 wins, which they should with that schedule, and then Tennessee gets 10 wins, all you have to do is put those schedules side by side. And you're like, okay, well, Tennessee played what's like a top 15 strength of schedule, maybe higher. I can't remember. They came out with that on ESPN FPI the other day. I can thumb through it, whatever. Whatever it is, they have a higher ranked strength of schedule versus Mizzou, whose opponent's winning percentage for this season, their opponent's winning percentage from the 2023 season is ranked 127th in the country. There's no other team in the SEC that's below like 63rd or 68th. So like if both of them end up 10-2, they don't have to get to Atlanta. They can just have that 10 wins. And if they have a win like against Bama or something like that, or like a big win like that, or at Oklahoma, you know, it's just another resume boost. I hate to say it. I think that they're going to be better than people think, and it kind of sucks to be honest. But you also make a really good point, just without the E, because here's the other part. Like, why not LaNorris Sellers? Like, I mean, why not? like, you know, they weren't the same ranked recruit out of high school, but they do have the same experience. LaNorris, you know, hasn't started a game yet, but like, I think that one thing you're going to see from LaNorris in comparison to Nico is that LaNorris is going to be counted on way more to lift everyone else around him up, whereas Nico has so much of a supporting cast already in place that he won't have to do that as much. We'll see how it plays out. Either way, I'm pulling for not Tennessee ever. So there's that. All right, guys, I appreciate you guys joining us. I hope all of you have a fantastic rest of your evening. We're going to get this up shortly. Real quick, before we go, want to give you one more shout out and make sure you talk about our second listen here. Thank you for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen, but make sure your second listen is for Locked On College Football and the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link anywhere online, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.